going to be here. Okay. So we're starting at 50a-4 if you have the book in front of you. Otherwise, I have the Mishnah right here. Let's see if we can X this out so we don't have to see this. Okay, amazing. So the Mishnah starts like this. Shlosha she'ochu ka'achas. 3 people who ate as one. Einon rishoyin lechalek. They're not allowed to divide, which means they're not allowed to recite the grace after meals, the Birchat Hamazon. They're not allowed to recite it separately. They must recite it together. V'chein arba, and if there's 4 who ate together, v'chein chamisha, or there's 5 who ate together. The same thing. Shisha, if there's 6 who ate together, nechlakin, they can divide into 2 groups of 3. Ad asara, until 10. Ba'asara, and if there's 10 that ate together, ein nechalakin, ad esrim. They're not allowed to divide into 2 groups until there are 20. So essentially, if you're sitting at a meal and you have a few people that are there, and one person says, it's late, I need to go to bed, I'm an early riser, the other 2 or 3 will have to do the Birchat Hamazon, they'll have to do the grace after meals, because you're not allowed to divide. You're not allowed to divide. You could divide in a situation where you have one person who is, let's say, has to go, but there's 6 people at the table. So 2 people will do the grace with after meals with that person. And then what they'll do is the other 3 will do their own Birchat Hamazon together later, until 10. If you have 10, the 10 have to do it together because it's special for 10 to do the grace after meals together. And that would apply until 20. You can divide into 2 10s. So until 10, you can divide into 3s. Once you have 10, you can only divide into 10s after that. That's what the Mishnah says. So it's talking about people who are going to do the Birchat Hamazon and how they should do the Birchat Hamazon. Shtei chavurot, 2 groups. Shehayu oichleis b'vayis echad. They were eating in one house. Bisman shemiksason royin elu es elu. When some of the members can see each other, they can combine and they can make a zuman. The imlav, but if not, which means if they can't see each other, elu mizamnim la'asman v'ilu mizamnim la'asman. They have to do for themselves and those for themselves. Very interesting. So you're in a large hall, and let's say the hall is divided by rooms, and it happens to be there's 100 people in the room, but you can't see all 100. Then you can only make a Birchat Hamazon with those people who you can visually identify. Let's say, for example, you have 8 people that are there, and 2 people went into the kitchen, but the kitchen is divided by a wall, and the person who's leading the grace after meals cannot see. They can hear, but they cannot see. Here, the Mishnah is differentiating hearing and seeing. If you can't see the person, they can't be part of your zimun. Fascinating. I think, and important, because it's something that could come up often. And it's a big question. If I can hear it, but I can't see it, am I part of the minyan? If I can hear it and I can't see it, am I part of the zimun? Ein mevorchen al hayayin ad sheyitain l'sucha mayim. Now the Mishnah is going to continue and says an interesting thing. You should not recite the blessing over wine until you add water to it. Divrei Rabbi Eliezer. This is what Rabbi Eliezer says. The Chachamim say, and you can make the blessing over it. What's the issue? We're going to talk about this later, but there's an issue with diluted and undiluted wine. In those days, a lot of the wines that people had were very, very strong, and they were not really possible to drink. And so they would have to dilute them with water in order to be able to drink them. They turn them into like some kind of grape juice. And so therefore, there's a debate in the Mishnah whether or not you can make the blessing on wine with undiluted wine, or it only can be diluted wine. And we're going to get to this later on in the Talmud. The Talmud goes into this fascinating discussion. That's the Mishnah. Questions, comments?
Question, if I may.
Yes.
It's actually not a question. It's a future question that I would be curious about. So this is very interesting, but we have a very modern application from this Mishnah that requires halachic discussion and resolution because we have the internet. Now, during times of COVID, people got together, they ate together over the internet for the closeness, etc. They were able to see, but I would think that's not the same seeing or proximity in terms of Zimum. So I'm raising that for a future discussion as we're looking at the ancient Talmud.
I think as we look at it, I think it'll be very, very good to yeah.
So let's keep that in mind. Yeah. Thanks.
Absolutely. My Kamash Milan. Now the Gemara starts. The beginning of the Mishnah, this Mishnah started that three people who ate together have to wait in order to do the Zimun. So the Gemara asks the question: what does this Mishnah teach us? Why do we need to know this? We already learned this. We know this. We've already been through this. Has anyone not been listening? We're saying to the Gemara, have we not been listening for the past, I don't know how many Mishnahs that we've gone through and the Talmuds we've gone through about Zimun? How many pages of this have we didn't know that three people who ate together have to make a Zimun and the other person can't get up? Why are you even telling us this? Hakamash Malan, what does the Gemara say? The Gemara answers that this teaches us Ki hada Amar Rabbi Abba Amar Shmuel, that Rabbi Abba said, that Shmuel said, Shloisha sheyashvu le'achol ka'achas, three people who sat and ate as one, but somebody came and joined them, but did not begin to eat. They cannot provide. The person who did not eat is also included in this. This is what it is differentiating. Lishna Achrina is another version of this. Amar Rabbi Abba bar Amar Shmuel. Rabbi Abba said that Shmuel said, Hachi ketane. This is what the Mishnah teaches. Shloisha sheyashvu le'achol ka'achas. Three people sat and ate as one. Afal pi sheko echad ve'echad oichel mikikaroi. Even though they didn't share a meal, but each and every one of them ate from their own loaf. They are not allowed to divide. Even though they didn't share the same loaf of bread, they each ate from their own loaves of bread. They're still considered, because they can see each other, because they're at the same table, they're still considered eating together, even though they didn't break the bread together, so to speak. Because that was part of the thing of eating together, was that you broke from the same loaf of bread. Maybe the Mishnah is teaching us, the Gemara says, the halacha, the law of Rav Huna, the Amar Rav Huna, because Rav Huna says, Shloisha sheba'u mishalesh chavurais. Three people came from three different groups. So what happened? There was a big room, and afterwards you wanted to go do your rounds and talk to people, and you're sitting at a table for desserts, and it's not the same table that you ate with. What do? You cannot divide. If you're the three there together, if you're there right now, you should not divide. That's the law of Rav Huna. So we can see there's a number of different discussions that we can have that we haven't had for yet about this particular issue. Amar Rav Chizda, says Rav Chizda, that it's only the law in the case where three people came from three groups of three people each, so that each of the original groups can say the zimun. What happens if you made your rounds during dessert, but there's two other people at your table waiting for you? You can't stay. You just say, excuse me. So if there was three others at your table and you're the fourth one, then you can make a new zimun here. But if it wasn't that way, then you have to wait. That's the reality. And you have to go back to your table because, so it's only, Rav Chizda says it's only in a case where those three individuals would not be worried about someone else waiting for them at their table. Amar Rava, says Rava, we now turn to 51a-b1. We now turn to 50b, not 51b, but 50b1. The law amadan ela the law akdimu hanoch va'azmun alayu b'duchtaihu. We said that this law is in a case where those people that were in the original groups did not include them in their original zimun, but in a case where they already did a zimun, maybe what happened was before they went and started walking around to see everybody else there, they already did a zimun, they cannot participate. They've already participated. Once you participated in a zimun, you cannot participate in another one. Once they did it, that's it. The obligation is that the three people who form a zimun, it stems from their obligation to form a zimun with the members of their original group. So before you start making your rounds for dessert, you have to do the zimun first with your group because that's the group you ate with. If they were already included in the zimun, then they can't do another zimun. They already were included. Omar Rava says, Mina Amein Allah. How do we know this? It's very nice that you're saying this, but how do we actually know this? The Tanan, because we learned in a Mishnah, Mita Shenigva Chetzia, a ritually impure bed, half which was stolen, Abda Chetzia, and half which was lost. Hold on, listen. If they were divided by the brothers, or they inherited from their father, and divided by the partners, it's Torah. If they restored it and reattached the parts, it's susceptible to ritual impurity from this point forward. So you want to know what the heck is he talking about, right? Anybody have the same question as me?
Perhaps on the same. I'm. This whole Gemara is taking the Mishnah to a Kabbalistic level, because so I don't know if I have the same thought of you because I don't know your thought, but I have. So I'm asking a question. I find this Mishnah and Gemara subsequent to be chillingly lovely, in that we have gone beyond the giving thanks to Hashem for the fruits and the wheat and the source of the food. We've gone to almost a Kabbalistic joining of spirits that interface with Hashem through the food. Talking of levels of three almost sounds like a group as a da'at or something of that nature. And I'm curious about your response that this whole area, that though we discussed it before, is entering an even higher spiritual level of what we're thanking Hashem for, not just the actual ingredients, but the bonding of getting to a minyan, etc., etc.
I think that it's important that not necessarily what we're thanking Hashem for, but don't forget, right? One of the people, if you've ever been at a Shabbat meal, you know that once you wash your hands for the hamotzi, you're not supposed to speak until you eat the bread. Why?
Is that a question or rhetorical?
No, I'm asking, right?
Well, it's because you have to be focused and thinking on the hamotzi that we're going to receive.
Right, because probably you're going to get into a conversation, you're going to forget that you're going to do the hamotzi. So a lot of Jewish law is surrounded around the fact that you're going to forget. We know human nature is to forget. So therefore, we want to avoid this issue within human nature that we don't forget. So the issue is that the person is going to go and do their rounds for dessert, and they're going to forget. So what do? We tell them, you ate with them, bless with them, and then go. But you should know, you've already blessed, so you can't be part of someone else's in one. They're going to say, oh, you came for dessert. Great, why don't you bless with us? And they're like, nope, sorry, done already.
So what if you eat something at the second table?
What if you start a new meal?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you start a new meal, then you can do that. Right? Remember our whole conversation about the waiter? They asked the waiter, but the waiter has to eat something. So as I would assume, based on that conversation, that you would be like the waiter. You come to a new meal, but you have to start a new meal.
Can you just have a piece of fruit?
Yeah. But it would be starting a new meal. You don't have to wash, but you'd have to have something. I would say a piece of cake would be better than a piece of fruit.
Okay,
because it would be a mezonot. It would be
Right.
a wheat-based item, and what we're doing is we're thanking God for the wheat, right? The challah, the bread is from wheat.
Yeah.
From one of the 5 grains. So having something from one of the 5 grains, I would say, is much better than just a piece of fruit. But the idea is that you're starting a new meal in order to, because you already fulfilled your mitzvah. Once you fulfill the mitzvah, you can't do another mitzvah.
Right. Like I really see this playing out, like, in shul, like after a kiddush or something, and then people start to move around.
Yeah. No, that's why that's why I use that example, because I see it very often.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dr. Kravitz, please.
Thank you. It's a little humor. I think the whole purpose of this Mishnah Gemara is to make all schnorrers of food beware that there's a responsibility and a duty after you schnorr the food. So think twice before you schnorr food. I see the humor was lost. All right. End of comment.
There is the reality. So often I think you study this Talmud, you're like, how is it practical? And then it becomes so practical to the point where you can even create a stand-up routine on it. Let's go to this thing of Tumah. I want to go to Rashi. It's note number 5 on 50b1. We're talking about Tumah. Only a person, food or utensil, can contract Tumah. Tumah is impurity. So, okay, we're not going to go into all the laws of Tumah right now, but there's an idea of, unfortunately, there's a misconception when it comes to the idea of Tumah. It doesn't mean that you're dirty. People say, oh, if you go to the mikvah, you're dirty. You're not dirty. There's ritual purity and ritual impurity. Someone who touched a dead body or was in the same room as a dead body is ritually impure. Someone who there are particular things today that happen to us that we become ritually impure. The only things that could become ritually impure is person, food, and utensil. when a utensil that has been contaminated with tumah becomes unsuitable for use, and loses its status as a utensil, it loses its tumah as well. Since half of a bed is not usable as a bed, it loses its status as a bed, and its tumah is released. So we have a situation where a bed was somehow divided. How it was divided doesn't matter. It's not usable as a bed. Half of it was stolen, or half of it was lost. And they want to come divide the bed. Even though it was tamei, even though it was impure, it's now pure because it can't be used. Got it? But if they put it back together and now it can be used as a bed, it still remains impure. It's only pure because it cannot be used. But once it can be used, the Gemara says that it is then now impure again, as it was initially. Mikanu lahaba, from here on, ain yes, which means it's susceptible to ritual impurity. Retroactively, la lemafreya, retroactively, la no. Alma, this is the case. Once they divided it, the ritual impurity left it. So you would say that it shouldn't be ritually impure anymore once you put it back together. Here we see here, what are we talking about ritual impurity? Once they included them in the zumun and they left them, they do not become with their previous obligation. So we're taking the example of ritual impurity and applying it to the zimun here, that just like when the bed is put back together, it goes back to the status of what it was. When you move from one place to another, you go back to the status of where you were, which means you become not able to be part of the zimun unless you change that status by having something else. The Mishnah said, what happens if you have two groups? Which means there's 6 people in the house. What happens if you, im yesh shamash b'neihem, if there's a common waiter among them, shamash mitzarfan. The waiter can join one group, but can't join the other group. Ein mevarachin avayayin. We learned in the Mishnah, you don't make a blessing over wine. Tanu Rabbanan, right? We said the last part of the Mishnah, we don't make a blessing over wine until you add water to it. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbi said, Yayin ad shaloi natam l'seichei mayim. Right? You don't make a blessing over wine until you add water to it. Ein mevarchim olav, you don't recite the blessing borei priya gefen. Ella, what do you say if you didn't add water? Borei priya eitz. So you could make the blessing, you just can't make the blessing of gefen, of wine. You can make the blessing of fruit, because it's still fruit. It's basically what the Gemara is saying is that it's fruit juice and it's not wine. So, since it's halachically not considered wine, then what? Since it's not considered wine, then you can't make the hagafen. But once he adds water to it, then you can make the hagafen on it. Different Rabbi Elazar, this is what Rabbi Elazar says. Say, ben kach or ben kach, both whether before water and after water. So Rabbi Elazar says that you have to have water. If you don't add water to it, then it's just fruit juice, and you need to just make a brei priya eitz on it, because that's what you make on fruit. But the rabbis say in either case, whether the water has been added or not, for all intents and purposes, you recite over it brei priya gefen. Come on. Azla Hada Amar Shmuel. The halacha is in accordance to that which Shmuel said. What did Shmuel say? Oisa adam kol tzarcha b'paskaman, Rabbi Eliezer. You can perform everything with bread. You can use it for purposes other than food. So therefore, he should not be concerned that he's treating the food without proper reverence. Why? Because this Rabbi Eliezer says, this is a very interesting law with regards to Tumah and Tahara. What is considered water through which you can wash your hands with? Rabbi Eliezer says that you can wash your hands with undiluted wine. It's considered water. So therefore, the same thing with bread. He's giving the halacha of bread that you don't have to worry about you can make the blessing with bread as well. Why? Because this is in accordance with Rabbi Eliezer, who says that undiluted wine is water, so the bread can become the blessing as well.
Rabbi, I'm getting a bit lost. If undiluted wine is like water, why do we add water to undiluted wine for Berei Pri Hagafen? It's a little bit of a oxymoronic.
It's a little bit oxymoronic. It's true. It's a little bit oxymoronic. It's a good question. I have to look it up. I didn't look it up this morning, but I will have to look it up. Let me see if there's anything here on it. Yeah. Go to note number 13, Rafi. The sages maintain that even prior to its dilution, Go to note number 11. What can we use to fill the requirement of Natilas Adayim, of washing your hands? You can wash your hands with water before eating bread. All fruit juices other than wine and olive oil are classified as waters of fruits. One may be used for Natilas Adayim, just like regular water, in accordance with its ruling that the grape product attains the status of wine, only then when diluted with water. Rabbi Eliezer maintains that prior to such dilution, it's considered ordinary fruit juice, which may be used for Natilas Adayim. So it's considered fruit of the water of the fruit until it's diluted and becomes wine. After its dilution, it's no longer classified as water of the fruit, but as wine, and therefore it's unfit for Natilas Adayim, says Rashi.
Thanks. I see their rationale, but it's a little bit convoluted. It's going to take a while to. There's a rationale to what they're saying, but we have to go a long distance to sort of understand the rationale, which is there.
I don't know. I got more confused with this rather than less.
Okay, so let's continue. Note number 13. The sages maintain that even prior to its dilution, the grape product is classified as wine. We followed our version of the Talmudic text, which Rashi maintains to be the correct one, according to which the wine is unfit for washing your hands, whereas other fruit juices, which are deemed waters of fruits, are fit for that purpose. There's another text that Rashi cites, according to which the opposite is true. Wine is classified as a beverage and is therefore fit for Natilas Adayim, whereas fruit juices are not classified as a beverage. They are unfit for washing your hands. There's another opinion which maintains that neither wine nor fruit juice can be used for washing your hands. According to Rabbi Eliezer and the sages, what they're discussing is washing one's hands for sanitary reasons, not for Natilas Adayim. So for sanitary reasons, no problem. For Natilas Adayim, it would be a problem. Does that help?
So Elena, I understand your question, and my simplicity is wine doesn't become wine until it's diluted, and the dilutant is here water. Water from the fruits, so wine that is not diluted is still water from the fruits, and we can use it to wash our hands, but it can't be called wine. So if we want the blessing of wine, water has to be added. So there's a rationale to that. but wine has a double use. So it could be used to wash your hands, but when it's not wine. And the only way to have wine is to add water to it, even though it acts as water before it's wine.
You're good?
I mean, I'm going to say no, to be honest, but that's okay. I'll muddle through.
Elena, in order to, for me as well, to really get a grasp on it, we need a few bottles inside of us. They're really on the get going.
And not diluted with
And
water.
not and undiluted, please. Exactly.
That's it.
Thank you.
When we get into wine in Jewish law, it's very, very complicated. Because wine should be fine. It's just great. It's just grape juice. It's just fermented grape juice. Why do you have to have kosher wine versus non-kosher wine? There shouldn't be an issue with any kind of wine. But the issue was that lots of wine was used for sacramental purposes. And so for certain traditions and instances, it would fall under the category of following other gods, of idolatry. And therefore, there would be no benefit that could be attained from it.
Rabbi, I'll add another physics, mathematical aspect to this. I think one of the great difficulties that humans have developed over millennia, when we're talking about products or human things that have been made by humans, wine being one of them, there's no gold standard. So you can have some fortified wines that are 50% alcohol. You can have wines that are 4% alcohol. And when we're doing it for ritual purposes, it's kind of important to have a sort of a uniform gold standard. And by adding water, we bring it to a closer spot of having a uniform standard. Before we had the bottles labeled, etc., in our mechanical way now.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a good point. Let's finish this particular piece of Talmud, and then we'll call it a day. Amar Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina says, Moedim Chachamim Rabbi Eliezer. The sages concur with Rabbi Eliezer. The Chaysha bracha, with regards for a cup of wine that we use for bracha. For example, the cup of wine that we're going to use for the grace after meals for the Birchat Hamazon, Shem Baruch and Olav, we do not recite a blessing over it until water is poured into it to dilute it. My timer, what's the reason? Amar Rav Oshir said, Beina mitzvah mina muvchar. Because we require that a mitzvah be performed in the choicest manner. We're worried that the undiluted wine is not going to be, you cannot consume it. So because you want it to be the choicest manner, you dilute the wine. As for the rabbis, they say you do make a gafen. Why? Amar Rab Zera, it's because chazli katari, because it's fit for karatai. What is that? Note number 18. Karatier is a generic form of beverage that is known as a Tanaic literature as on Nomlin and on Guntis. These are made from full-strength wine, honey, and pepper. And for full-strength wine, clear water and balsam oil. So they were obviously some kind of beverage. Well, full-strength wine, honey, and pepper. It sounds really, really intense. Really, really intense.
Rabbi, that's known as mead.
Yeah. Yeah, that's mead, exactly. So some kind of mead. That's what they're referring to there. Okay, but what about the one that's with clear water and balsam oil? Also, it's another kind of mead.
The reason why that's not for Borei Priagafen is that when you put balsam oil, you're separating water from the
And
wine.
oil, that's right. You're
Water, so the oil separates the water, so it doesn't have the same dilutionary effect.
That's right. There's no emulsifier there. That's interesting. One might ask, if pure wine is not considered a superior product on account of its fitness to be drunk upon dilution with water, why should you be considered a superior product when it's part of a mead beverage? The answer is that since dilution calls for mixing 3 parts of water for every 1 part of wine, the final product is not considered the same beverage as undiluted wine. The mead, however, pure wine is the major ingredient, as much as the mead is considered the same beverage as undiluted wine. Pure wine is therefore more readily considered to have undergone a positive transformation on account of its fitness for use in the mead. Okay.
So it's saying that while we need to dilute the wine, the pure wine can be used as an adjunct in other varieties.
Yeah.
But I have to ask, do we say Borei Priagafen for even though there's pure wine in the mead? That for me, that's not resolved as yet. I'm asking that
I don't know
question.
if we, I mean, the answer is yes, but I don't know if we resolved it in the Talmud yet.
And the reason why I can go both ways with that question for mead that has pure wine, or undiluted wine in its formula, I can take it either as well, one way would be you don't say Borei Priagafen because the inclusive wine isn't diluted primarily. It's sort of the grape. And I can understand where the mixture dilutes the amount of the pure wine. So I can go either way, but have you come across something like that? Oh, so what do you say? You're given a glass of mead. You're saying it has a combination. There's pepper, there's whatever that includes a little pure wine. And you say, okay, I'll drink it. What bracha do you say?
It depends on how much wine there is in the mead.
Okay, so 3 parts of any substance, not just water, would lead us to Borei Priagafen? Question?
Yes.
Okay.
I would say, based on halacha, that if there's more wine than other things, then it should be agafen.
Okay. Boy, we could get drunk.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Rabbi,
Yes.
I'm having difficulty understanding this whole thing about wine, because if a wine drinker didn't know it was from idolatries, and we don't believe in other gods, we don't believe that they have any power, what difference does it make if he drinks the wine? Surely it's just a physical, just don't get.
Because you can't have hana, you can't have pleasure from anything that was used for idolatry.
Is that not itself idolatrous because it's saying there's some power to the...
Not that it's power, it's that part of that commandment is not having any pleasure from something that was used for idolatry.
You might get attached to it. Do you mean you might get attached?
No, that's the commandment. The commandment is that we don't take any, and there it happened to be that there was for a long period of time, even today, there are many wines that are used for idolatry. I mean, the fact that shakanuf the pop, there's a kosher version of it, is very shocking to me. There's a kosher shakanuf the pop.
What about the thing about 1 in 60? If it's less than 1 in 60?
No, that's only after the fact. You can't do that before the fact. If you knew about it, you can't use that ruling. Yeah. Dr. Kravitz?
followed what you said. I still find it hard to agree, but I
Yeah.
appreciate you explaining.
Okay, look, I'm just, I don't make it up.
Rabbi, thank you. Rabbi, I just wanted to share a thought. When you said you can't, it's a commandment, you cannot take pleasure from idolatry. I thought the original commandment didn't use pleasure, but perhaps it was stated in the Torah after.
Hana'ah, yes, it's
And what I love about it, so I'm sharing the thought, is that this is the first statement that in our history against Schadenfreude.
there you go.
And I think that's so lovely that contrary, we should not have Schadenfreude. And this is an example of it. So
Yeah.
my question to you is, do we have joy when we hear Avram smashing the idols? Isn't there some joy that comes from that? And is that forbidden?
You're not even allowed to celebrate the downfall of your enemies, says the Torah.
It's very powerful. And I'm glad that you brought that up because it's a very important source. Thank you.
No, it's very, very important. Okay, I think we're going to continue with the whole bread conversation. We'll continue that next week. So with that, I wish you a wonderful day. To be continued.
Shabbat shalom to everyone.
Shabbat shalom. Thank you so much.
Shabbat shalom.
Have a great day.
Bye.